this whole notion of self-loathing and growing up to believe that we are imperfect and that we have to live up to society's standards, is this something that you had to struggle with at some point in your life? How did you come to this realization that this is an epidemic?
I think for me, the fundamental baseline of the meditation room was very telling for me because for me, peace and connection, all these things, the oneness, the enlightenment, all of these things that people were trying to attain was my normal. It was my natural. It was my normal. And what I very quickly began to realize that even though it's everyone else's natural state of being, it's not their normal. And so for me, it was almost like everyone else's unwillingness to embrace the totality of who they were at their baseline, at their essential level, became almost my source of suffering. Because all of a sudden now here I am living in a world where profoundly connected, profoundly empathic, profoundly related to life, things were happening all around me, even as a child. Suffering in all forms was just dissolving, ignorance was falling away, people were just having experiences. And it wasn't that I was doing anything. It
Mhm.
was just that I never left the meditation room. I never left the essence of myself. Because love in and of itself is very catalytic. And just being the love that you are catalyzes everything and everyone. Because in the end, in the presence of that love, we have to return to that love that we are. And if you spend enough time around it, eventually
Mhm.
you'll allow yourself to finally be it. And
Right.
so it was an interesting journey of beginning at the end in the meditation room and then going through life, all the conditioning, all the programming, all of the experiences that invalidate the lack of safety and the lack of certainty in being an individual, and then once again reclaiming the essence of the meditation room and now living it and sharing it with thousands of people every day, every morning.
Mm. So you stay anchored in that source of love and that authenticity that you have cultivated over the years.
And in staying in that means just to be the human being that you are. You see, I think there are these highfalutin concepts and ideas that people are trying to live up to that they're never going to live up to. See, and again, this is where the self-invalidation comes in. You know, when Oprah interviewed me, I said, you know, your humanity is the doorway to your divinity.
Mm.
Don't be spiritual, be human. Maybe being human is the most spiritual thing of all.
That's
And maybe that's
interesting.
the whole point.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the whole point, is to be a human being, is to think things, is to have feelings, is to have emotions. And also, in accepting these parts of ourselves, we're preserving the right for other people to have emotions and feelings and thoughts in the future. Because if all of a sudden we decide that, or we continue down this path of this reductionist kind of model, that we have to get rid of emotions and get rid of feelings and get rid of thoughts and get rid of the mind, and then, well, hey, let's just get rid of our biology and let's get rid of our uniqueness and let's just get rid of everything because we'd just be so much better off without it, then what's going to happen is if we fundamentally continue to demonize being a human being,
Yeah.
somebody's going to come up with a brilliant idea, which is all, hey, let's just give you a chip. Let's just give you this pill. Let's just give you whatever it is that we give you because
Sure.
you've now acquiesced your individuality, your expression. So you've just voluntarily handed over your humanity and your expression, and that means that it ceases to exist.
Mm. Yeah, and I think since many, many years, we've been taught to be cautious about these instincts of ours or the parts of us that are unsavory, and to be reliant on the rational mind or some other higher order that would give us the answers. So I think that is something that is intergenerational, don't you think?
I think it's a very Western phenomenon, actually, because the Western phenomenon, the transformational paradigm, the spiritual paradigm, is all based in the mind.
Yes.
And what we have done in the Western world is we have given significance and importance to the mind, and we've put that before the heart. We've put that before the oneness, the love, the connection, the unity, right? The wholeness of everything, the completion of everything. And so as long as we continue to live in a mind-dominated society, and why do we do that? Because we're afraid. The over-rationalization, the need to investigate everything through to its finalities because you just don't trust yourself. You're
Yeah.
insecure, basically, you're afraid.
Mhm.
That's all
Yeah.
based in survival.
Sure.
And so, in simple terms, we're pivoting away from survival and all the symptoms of survival, which is everything that all of you are working on, to finally coming into acceptance and realizing, well, wait a minute, all of these things were just entry points into my coming home to my heart and
Mhm.
living in a greater connection to the love that I am, and
Yeah.
sourcing my life from this greater connection to the love that I am.
Yeah. And you describe that as radical acceptance in your book, You Are Enough. What does that actually feel like, Panache? Because it can sound a bit esoteric to people. So, what does it
Hmm.
feel like to experience radical acceptance and to really come from this place of wholeheartedness from the soul? Can you please, shed some light on that?
Sure. So, to come into a place of radical acceptance is to no longer deny yourself your humanity, and to no longer need to deny yourself an aspect of human expression. The reason why we have these very extreme manifestations of human expression, like rage or depression or paralyzing PTSD and all these other manifestations, is because we have fundamentally been taught to reject these aspects of ourselves and to make them wrong. So, what's happened is we've constructed layers of judgment where there is no judgment. And ironically, the highest form of spiritual practice is to observe yourself without judgment. So even spirituality and working on yourself and transformation in and of itself has inserted layers of complexity, layers of judgment, layers of self-invalidation into it, which is even weirder, because it's supposed to be the very thing that frees you from that. So what I've discovered is the first thing is that, okay, we're human, all right? What do we have to do in relationship to our humanity? Nothing. Why? Because it's never going to change anytime soon. What does that allow us to do? It allows us to come into the acceptance of it. It allows us to come into the acceptance of our emotions. It allows us to come into the acceptance of our thoughts. So the first entry point is acceptance. We focus on all of this every morning in Call to Come. Once we've come into the acceptance, so we can just come back to the awareness of our breath.
Hmm.
Why? Because in the awareness of our breath, we create the avenue for the integration of that aspect of being human. And that's it. And that acceptance, that embracing, and that coming back to the awareness of our breath, at that point then, we're engaging in the highest form of spiritual practice, which is to observe yourself without judgment. So instead of fixing, healing, changing, and improving something, or defending it or protecting it, you can just accept it, and then you can come back to your breath, you can come back to the awareness of your breath, settle into it, and then that provides you the opportunity to respond from love to what's going on, to respond from who you authentically are to your life and what's unfolding in your life. And that's a very simple articulation of something that, you know, can
Yeah.
receive a deeper, explanation, but just to give people a snapshot,
Yeah.
you're
And I,
operating a fundamentally flawed thesis if you're continually trying to change and improve yourself.
yeah, and I love that you posit it as a practice is because this is something that you need to keep repeating so that you change the patterns in your mind. And especially if you're dealing with some really heavy emotions like fear, shame, and all of that, which is
Yeah.
associated with quite often associated with not enoughness. And, that is
Hmm.
quite rampant in our society. Do you think there has to be a more intense approach for those who really are suffering from those weightier feelings that probably were caused by trauma or some very difficult experiences they had in their past?
So what's fascinating is that when people speak of the past and trauma, the only thing that keeps them perpetually stuck in it is their lack of acceptance of the fact that it happened. Once
Hmm.
somebody actually accepts the fact that the trauma or the abuse occurred, that's the end of the need to re-traumatize and relive it every day. So people unwittingly are compounding their PTSD by not accepting that what happened happened. Once you finally get to a place where you can accept what happened, whatever that was, the trauma, the abuse, and why do we accept it? Because we can't change it. We can't go back in time and have it be different. And actually, when we realize what the purpose of these experiences are, we welcome them. And here's why. Because our pain and our trauma, when accepted, becomes an avenue of connection, and it becomes an expression of service in the world. And this is why we have these things happen to us. We're not being punished. We didn't do something wrong. It's a part of the ever unfolding journey that we're on. And this journey that we're on is a journey of unveiling, uncovering our hearts and living from them, and then loving ourselves and loving the world. Well, the truth is that in the absence of that suffering, in the absence of that struggle, in the absence of that hardship, you would be totally unrelatable and totally ineffective.
Yeah,
And so,
that's right.
even as it relates to what we perceive to be the worst day of our lives, that worst day of our life actually becomes the entry point into something far greater that's beyond us on a personal level than we could ever imagine. Hmm.
It does touch on this truth that you just shared. That's through our vulnerabilities that we can grow and that we can use that as a way to be of service to the world. And I've certainly done that
Mm.
in my own life, and that has proven to be very effective. So,
Yeah, and that's really the only authentic way to be out in the world now. I think the days of regurgitating somebody else's work or recycling some 16th century philosopher or taking some technique or modality and trying to co-opt it and make it your own, I think that that's all played out. Like the TikTok bubblegum version of all of this has played out. I
yeah.
think that unless it's based in some direct experience or self-revelation, it doesn't
Yes.
have a future.
Yeah.
And I think that people are beginning to realize that they've invested 60 or 70 years of their lives into things, countless hours, countless resources, time, money, you name it, everything into things that haven't actually made a difference. And that's great because that's the beginning of them discovering something that does.
Okay. So you consider a lot of those modalities ineffective?
Totally ineffective because they're all based in separation and duality. They're all
Can you say
based in the
more?
presupposition that you,
Okay.
well, they're all based in the presupposition or the pre. Um, it's almost like you've been pre-qualified as flawed the very moment you participate in those things. So, in order for those things to exist, there has to be some hierarchy of experience and some deficiency in the individual. So, people who seek out those things are basically just operating from some level of insecurity and some lack of awareness of as to who they really are. A person who knows themselves and loves themselves has no requirement for any of these things
Yeah.
because they realize that they've got what it takes actually within themselves through the acceptance of their humanity to navigate their lives. And so what's happened is techniques and modalities, the only reason why they exist is people are still stuck in separation and duality. They're still living in this polarity of high vibration and low vibration, which is a totally manufactured and constructed archetype that's false. There is no higher vibration or lower vibration, there's only just infinite vibration. And the only way to liberate that infinite vibration is to turn and face yourself with open arms and a heart full of love. And the sooner people get this, the better. In fact, your participation in techniques and modalities is just another form of self-invalidation.